Welcome to the Next Level Human podcast. As a human, you have a job to do. In fact, you have 4 jobs: to earn and manage money, to attain and maintain health and fitness, to build and sustain personal relationships, to find meaning and make a difference. None of these jobs are taught in school, and that is what this podcast is designed to do. To educate us all on living our most fulfilled lives through the mastery of these 4 jobs. I'm your host, Dr. Jade Teta, and I believe we are here living this life for 3 reasons and 3 reasons only: to learn, to teach, and to love. In this podcast, I will be learning, teaching, and loving right along with you. I'm grateful to have your company. Here's to our next level. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to today's show. Today's show is another one of those shows that has been asked for and talked about, and I've been putting it off. And part of the reason why, if I'm 100% honest, is because I know probably after this show, if you don't hate me yet, you're probably going to start hating me after this show. Or if you love me, you're probably going to hate me after this show. And the reason why is this show is basically about politics. And so as soon as you hear that, immediately people start getting sort of prickly, don't they? The hair starts standing up on the back of your neck. You start, sort of adopting that fighter's position as if there's going to be an argument. You're basically ready to defend the person you voted for and your team, etc. And I get it. I understand it. And actually, it's really interesting because I recently was going through the reviews for some of my books. My book, Next Level Tribe, a book I wrote with my co-author, Danny Coleman, and one of the reviews basically said, I don't like the fact that Jade talks about politics. And I want to address this really quick because a lot of people feel this way. And I'm just going to come out and say, I adamantly, I don't know how many times I can say adamantly, disagree with that idea. In fact, I think it's an asinine idea. It's a very immature, silly idea. And the reason why is because politics, more than anything else, informs us about our values. If we don't talk about politics, we don't understand other humans. And if we don't understand other humans, we can't connect with other humans. We can't learn from other humans. If we can't connect and learn from other humans, we can't evolve ourselves or evolve as a community and a culture and team human. So to me, it is a really very troubling sign that people somehow think politics is off limits. To me, politics is one of the best ways to understand people, to understand yourself, to grow and to learn and to get better as a human. And so we are going to talk about politics, like it or not. I apologize. You're welcome to shut off the show right now and go no further. Now, that being said, I will ask you to do your best to put your biases aside. This is one of those things where you have to sit, you have to kind of listen, you have to just say, okay, I'm just going to listen to what Jade has to say. And this is the Next Level Human podcast. Obviously, if you are listening to this, you fancy yourself as someone who wants to grow and learn. That's the prime directive of a next level human. Life is about growth and evolution. It's about personal development. And so we purposely expose ourselves, if we're trying to be next level humans, to ideas that might challenge our pre-existing notions and ideas. And so one of the things I'll say right off the bat, though, is that you're in luck with me. And the reason you're in luck with me is because I hate both sides, right? I loathe the Republicans. I loathe the Democrats if you're in the United States. I loathe extreme liberalism, and I loathe extreme conservatism. I loathe team-based things to begin with. So my personal sort of way I come at this is I like good people. I like good ideas. I like good communicators, and I like people with good judgment. And from my perspective, those types of humans come from different political parties. They show up in different ways. Not only that, I'm also one of these people who believes very strongly that if we only have one voice, if we only have the Republicans and they're speaking, or we only have the Democrats, or the liberals are dominating or the conservatives are dominating, that does not help anyone grow because we're only getting one side of the equation. From my perspective, this liberal conservative sort of way that we see things is very useful. I'll give you an example of this. Right now, if you're listening to this, we're going through the coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2 virus quarantine. We're just coming out of it, perhaps. And there's this big debate going on in the United States and across the world about how fast to open up economies. And you got people on one side of the spectrum saying we should open up everything. We never should have shut things down in the first place. And then you got other people saying, no, we have to, keep things closed and, make sure that we're, looking after. And to me, I'm like, this is a good debate to have. No one really knows, not to mention, depending on the state you're in. I'm in the state of California in the United States. That's very different than being in the state of, let's say, Tennessee in the United States, or being in Sweden or Italy or, Norway. This is, or New Zealand, right? Or Japan or China. It's all very different. And so obviously the leaders need to have a debate. And the way I look at this is I say, let's just take the United States really quickly. I don't try to jump on teams. I essentially say we don't really know. Each governor, each leader in their state needs to make decisions based on what is being given to them. And we will see. Some of them are being a little bit more conservative. And, what's really interesting is a lot of the liberal, sort of progressive Democrats are being far more conservative in keeping things closed, in terms of being conservative with, not opening up the economy, and, conservative with saving lives, whereas the conservatives are sort of being a little bit more liberal with, hey, let's let people figure it out. We got to get back to work, etc. From my perspective, there is validity in both of these points. And further, if we let each side work it out and make these leaders, we can kind of see what's working and what isn't, right? Imagine if all states and all countries just opened up and everything went wrong, or vice versa. All states or all countries sort of closed down and kept their borders closed. That could be a disaster too. This is part of the benefit of having an open dialogue and not getting mad and being about teamthink and just saying what's working and what's not. And of course, in a situation like this, we may not have all the data for another couple years, but at least that we can see what worked and what didn't. And if we're moving along, we can even pivot. Let's say some of the states in the United States that are opening up their economies prove to be that things aren't that bad. Well, they tell us and we can adjust. Let's say some of the states like California that were being a little bit more aggressive and conservative in keeping the economies closed. Maybe we see that they did a better job, and it's just information for us. It's growth. And so what the problem is, a lot of times, is people would rather be right and defend their team rather than say, okay, there's validity here and there's validity there. And there also is some benefit to the debate and some benefit to trying different things because that's how we test. That's how that works. That's the whole idea of a market-based economy, isn't it? It's sort of like, let the market prove the system. Let's not let the, sort of government define what goods and services are going to be used. So that's kind of where I come at this. I am someone, there's people on the extreme right, there's people on the extreme left. If I'm any extreme, I'm really the extreme middle. But even the extreme middle, I'm really, I float, back and forth based on the ideas. And so that's what you're getting with me when it comes to politics. I am an undeclared in terms of where I vote. I do not consider myself a Democrat, and I do not consider myself a Republican. I don't consider myself liberal or conservative. I don't like these labels because to me, I'm all about good people, good ideas, good leaders with good judgment, right? And I sort of make sort of my decisions based on that. And I'm going to explain to you sort of how I go through my process. And by the way, the other thing I'll say before we launch into this podcast is you oftentimes, as I'm sitting here podcasting, sometimes people assume it's all opinion based. Most all of what I do on these podcasts when I deliver them to you is really evidence-based. It's data-driven. It's kind of the person that I am. And so I'm not just giving you my opinion. And when I do give you my opinion, I'll try to give you my bias. Of course, I am human. So yes, there's bias baked into everything we humans do, including me and this particular podcast. But I endeavor to make sure that I'm just essentially delivering to you data and something that is based on something other than just my opinion. So the first thing I want to do as we get into this, because this is going to be specifically about choosing political leaders. How do we choose leaders, and what would be a next level human leader? As a matter of fact, this is the question that I've been getting from my friends on both sides of the aisle. Jade, I'm curious. I know this is the question they asked me. It's essentially phrased like this. Jade, I'm curious. I know you don't really take, sort of teams, and you tend to avoid that. What are the principles if I'm looking to vote, for leaders next year and in the next election or whatever? What kind of things would a next level human be looking at? What would someone who's operating from a base level, how would they vote and behave? What would someone who's operating from a culture level behave? What about a next level? Are there base level leaders and culture level leaders and next level leaders? Yes, there are. Now, this terminology, you might already be getting confused if you haven't sort of listened to my podcast before. I basically break down different human behaviors. And it's important you understand that we are all of these. All of us humans have these behaviors in us. It's called next level human for a reason, because it's not higher level human, because higher level sort of pretends that there's I'm better than you are. Next level is essentially avoids that and says we're trying to be the best humans we can be. And it also built into that essentially shows that every human essentially has something to offer. So the whole idea of the next level human is built off of horizontal hierarchies, not vertical hierarchies. What I mean by that is a vertical hierarchy essentially says some people are higher and other people are lower down on the totem pole. In other words, there are desirable people who have money and fame and fortune and career success, etc., and they're up higher on the ring, and then everyone else is lower down, and there's just people better than other people. That's a vertical hierarchy. The horizontal hierarchy says that we are each different. It's like being a master of different games. I might be great on the American football field. You might be great on the rugby field, or the ping pong table, or the volleyball court. Everyone has something to offer being human, a domain that they excel in, that they could teach and contribute in. Even if you ended up on the street, there is someone who would be able to teach you how to survive, find your next meal, etc. And this is the way that a next level human looks at humans in general, from a very horizontal, hierarchical perspective. Let's do a review real quick before we get into the leader aspect of this on base level humans, culture level humans, and next level humans. The way to look at this, and just so you want to know, for those of you who are like, where can I get information on this? I've had a lot of people ask, Jade, what book are you reading, or where's the research on these types? Well, these are my constructs. These are built out of primarily the following sort of areas of study: reciprocity style, personality style, attachment style, emotional drivers, the big 5 personality traits, a deep dive into things like Kantian ethics and views from Stoicism and Hegel about and Kant and all these sort of great philosophers and thinkers throughout the years, as well as a deep psychology study. And so that's where all this comes from. The way to think about this is really the best way, I think, to think about this is think about how we grow up as humans. We start as children, we then go through adolescence, and then we get into mature adulthood, we hope. But I think most of us know that the vast majority of humanity stays in adolescence almost their whole entire life. And I'll walk you through this real quick. But as a child, we are essentially by default a base level human. And there's no good or bad labels here. So just kind of listen to this and hopefully you'll understand. And for those of you who've heard this before, it'll be good review as we get into the idea of what is a next level human leader. Base level humans, you can kind of think of them as children from the ages of, infancy up to sort of childhood, about 6 years old. We know through research that, children are basically developing more and more consciousness through those first 6 years. So they're largely unconscious in their infancy, and then they become more and more conscious. And consciousness meaning aware of themselves and their interactions with the world and aware of other people. But by their very nature, base level humans and children they are the center of their universe. They essentially must be cared for. They don't have the skills and or the understanding and or the sort of wherewithal to be able to take care of themselves. So they are dependents. They are dependent on their parents or their caretakers. And the primary major concern for these types of people or children in general is the concern of safety, because they don't necessarily know the world yet. This is why you got to tell them, don't touch that, don't go towards that, glass can cut you, this might be a problem, don't fall off the cliff, don't go over there, beware of dogs, and like all this kind of stuff. Safety is the major concern. So a base level human really has as their primary major concern safety and certainty. So even as an adult, if you are operating from your base level human tendencies, you are going back into safety and certainty needs. And the major emotional driver that brings these out is fear. Fear is the driver that makes you go base level. It makes you seek safety and certainty. When we have fear and uncertainty, we tend to go back to habits, safety, and sort of more certain oriented places. We seek that. Now, also base level human has a lot to do with sort of the primitive brain, the sort of brain stem and the early nervous system, sort of our lizard brain, the sort of fight, flight, or freeze responses. And so when these base level humans or children are usually they are under fear, or their certainty is threatened, or their safety is threatened, they typically go back into this fight, flight, or freeze sort of mentality, which starts to give you a little bit of a hint when you are acting base level or you have somebody else who's sort of base level. Now, in terms of their personality styles, these people tend to be pessimists. Their reciprocity style tends to be that of a taker, and their attachment style, the way they sort of relate in romance and with sort of their close parents and things like that, is an avoidant sort of style. I'm not going to get into all of these, but you just want to basically understand that this is sort of your child self, your lizard brain self, your fearful, safety-oriented certainty self. The motto of a base level human is really that it's me against the world, because they are the center of the universe. What happens in childhood is that you are the center of the universe until that one day where you take someone else's toy and they start crying and your mirror neurons go off if you're a normally functioning human, and you feel the pain that they feel from the thing that you took away from them. We have these mirror neurons that allow us to see how other people feel and relate to how other people feel. And or your parent says, don't do that, that's wrong. Then slowly but surely you stop being the center of the universe and you realize that there are other people that matter too, that other people have feelings too, and that you have to get along with others. And so the child who is operating at base level tends to be all about themselves. It's basically all about their safety, their certainty, their needs. It's very ego-driven and very narcissistic. These are base level human types. They tend to be very much all about them and their needs. Everything revolves around them. Think of it like a spoiled child. Their philosophy in terms of ethics and morality is basically that whole idea of eye for an eye. Treat others the way they treat you. If they are mean to you, you are mean to them. Take what you can get. Me against the world. No one matters but me. This is the base level human, lizard brain, primitive human psychology, child level sort of thinking. And by the way, I know it can sound bad, like this is a bad thing, but think about this for a minute. This serves us to go base level at times. It is a protective mechanism. Sometimes you do need to fight, flight, or flee and avoid things. However, if you're always showing up in all kinds of situations, fighting, deflecting, fleeing, all that kind of stuff, then you know what's happening. Now, as it pertains to a leader, think about any leader that you've known or been around in your organizations, in politics, throughout history that tend to approach leadership in that way, that it's all about them. It's all very ego-based. It's all very narcissistic. And it's also about, I'm going to fight other people. I'm going to come at it from that point of view, or I'm going to avoid, I'm just going to shut down and not listen to you, right? Or I'm going to sort of flee and sort of just run away. We all know people like this when they kind of their certainty is threatened or their safety is threatened, or they are basically told that they are wrong and they can't help it. It's sort of like throwing an adult temper tantrum. They're either going to attack you back, they're just going to ignore you sort of altogether, right? That's sort of the actions, and then do what they want to do. Oftentimes, the base level human is simply about winning. And the reason they want to win so badly is that if they lose, what happens? Now they're uncertain again. They need to win. They need to be right. Why? Because if they're wrong, they're uncertain again. So can you see that safety and certainty is their primary concern, and losing or being wrong really confronts that and then leads to fear and this uncomfortable feeling. And so that's how a base level human sort of acts. The child self and a base level leader will sort of be that way as well. They have a very difficult time rising above. They can act very sort of petty and all those kinds of things. Now, as we grow as humans, we kind of come into adolescence. Now we start understanding, wow, other people get hurt. I can see that they get hurt. This is about community and connection, and I have to learn to get along with others. And you get into junior high and you get into high school, and it becomes very team-based and status-based. The major concern at that point is acceptance, right? And the major emotional driver is no longer fear, but now it's rejection. You want to be accepted and not rejected as a culture level human, which leads to some very peculiar sort of ways of behaving. Basically, when your other team members are around, you will pile on. You'll basically adopt their stance. You will become, if they're the bully, you'll become the bully. If they believe a thing, you'll believe that same thing. However, if your team members are not around, you will become sort of, timid and not want to take a stand and just want to sort of get along and not really want to jump into the fray and, sort of be, this person who's very kind and just trying to get along. And so culture level humans are hard to pin down because they can get very nasty and team based when their team is around. When they feel sort of isolated or in a new situation, though, they can come across as very kind and go along to get along and let's not ruffle feathers. And different cultural level humans, depending on how they grew up in their household and what their parents told them what was right or wrong, or their religion said was right or wrong, or that kind of thing, or whatever team they associate with, that's sort of how they will behave. But you can definitely have culture level humans that can be very nasty and team oriented. The difference is, though, a base level human who's sort of being nasty and that kind of stuff is doing so out of fear and a desire to have certainty and win. A culture level human is doing it to fit in with their team, to have status, to be accepted and not be rejected, right? And that can oftentimes mean, to not be rejected sometimes means you say nothing and you just get along and you try to make everybody sort of happy. So we all know people like this, or sort of like the people pleasers. People pleasing is a very culture level thing. So is piling on and being sort of, around your things and teasing people, like the group of bullies in your high school who sort of did that. Very culture level. Now, the personality style of a culture level human is very envious in nature. They look out there and say, well, he's got success, she's got a nice car, she's been able to do well in business, etc. And so they're sort of envious. They're motivated by trying to get what you've got. It's sort of this idea of keeping up with the Joneses. In terms of their reciprocity style, they tend to be matchers. They basically tend to say, well, I'll do for you if you do for me, or you did for me, so I feel like I have to do for you, right? So that's kind of how that works. And of course, the motto of sort of this culture level human is, it's us against them. So it's no longer me against the world. It's more our team, my team against your team, the Democrats versus the Republicans versus the Democrats, right? That's kind of how they look at it. They're very team based. And they'll oftentimes let some of their integrity and their morals go out the window when their team says you have to do it this way. They tend to fall in line. In terms of their philosophy is interesting. It's more like the golden rule, right? It's like, all right, treat others how you want to be treated. Let's kind of go along to sort of get along. And I'll treat people the way my team says we all should be treated, right? So if I'm a Christian, and religion, by the way, is a very culture-level human construct. If I'm a Christian, I'll treat people according to the Christian way of treating people, right? If I am Muslim, I'll treat people according to those traditions. This is very sort of culture level. And most people, by the way, are these culture level sort of types. I would say, the vast majority of humans are just culture level. They don't really know which way to go, so they just sort of pick a team and then listen to the team. Saves them some thought, right? Saves them and keeps them from being rejected, and they always know they'll be accepted in that way. In a very real sense, it's funny because base level humans and next level humans tend to be the leaders. And the reason why is because, believe it or not, base level humans and next level humans have something in common that they don't have in common with culture level, and that is the idea that they tend to want to think differently. They do it for different reasons. A base level human thinks differently from culture because they want to win and they want to be right and they want to win the race, right, so to speak. So they can be contrarians. They just want to disagree oftentimes, especially if it is something that goes against their safety sort of and certainty-oriented sort of world. They will oftentimes just disagree to disagree. Next level humans often disagree because they think beyond culture level. They oftentimes are in a position where they essentially go, wait, we should think more deeply about this rather than just accepting what's always been done. Next level humans are always trying to learn and grow. Base level humans are always trying to stay and, stick to what we've always done. Next level humans are like, let's try to add on and get better in what we've done. And culture level humans are sort of stuck in the middle here. And so the leaders we typically get are going to be base level humans or next level humans. Culture level humans, normally not, because they are usually followers and not leaders. So hopefully you can kind of understand about how this kind of happens. That's why I say if you're really looking at a leader, base level humans and next level humans will get a lot of followers because they tend to be a little bit more certainty-oriented. They seem to have things figured out, but there's some telltale signs about next level humans versus base level humans in that. Now, the next level human, their major concern is purpose, and their major emotional driver is fulfillment. And fulfillment is an interesting emotion because fulfillment is really about the idea that I recognize, meaning the next level human type says, I have certain, talents and superpowers that I can uniquely bring to the world to make the world a better place. And I feel fulfilled when I'm able to do that, right? That's sort of the next level human construct. So their major concern is finding purpose, and their major emotional driver is fulfillment. In terms of personality style, they tend to be more optimistic and trusting in nature. They tend to see more favorable angels, our better side. They tend to see humans they tend to see humans as basically good, whereas base level humans basically see humans as basically bad. Base level humans will see humans as basically lazy and basically fearful and basically not great. And where next level humans will say, no, humans are basically good. And culture level humans tend to waffle sort of back and forth. In terms of reciprocity style, they tend to be givers, next level humans, but they do it with boundaries. In other words, a next level human politically is not going to be something like, let's just give everybody something for free. They will say, let's default for giving something, but it's also recognize that humans, to feel like they are responsible and they are accomplished and that they are, to have some self sort of confidence about themselves, they need to work for what they get. So a giver may say, yes, let's give, but we're not going to give freely. We also expect and as a matter of fact, realize that humans have to work as well. Otherwise, they don't actually feel that sense of self-confidence and it never grows. And so they are givers with this idea of, yes, humans have to feel responsible and have some sort of self confidence. They tend to be secure in their relationship, and their motto is we're all one. Next level humans tend to be the ones who aren't as much nationalists, but are more see us as one team human. So they tend to see, sort of the world as we are all sort of one human race versus dividing us and saying, for example, we're better than this group, right? Culture level humans will tend to be, a little bit more nationalist in the way they see things, right? Like, America's better than Europe, or Europe's better than America, or China and Russia. They tend to be very nationalist, whereas next level humans tend to be sort of universalists, and base level humans tend to be a little bit more anarchist in a sense. They tend to be, more over on the extreme on either side, right? They would be sort of the extreme right-wing neo-Nazis or the extreme left-wing anarchists, right? Those would be sort of the base-level humans in the political sort of spectrum. The culture-level types would be more sort of the nationalist. Our team is better than yours. And then the next-level humans are going to be the types that say, hey, we all live on this planet. While I am biased towards my country and, know that I have to put my oxygen mask on first before I help someone else, I also realize we're not separated from sort of the others, right? So a next level human is going to be looking at things like that. Yes, they're going to take care of themselves, and then they're going to take care of their own, sort of country, but then they're also going to be, out there, also helping others as well. And I would say that the United States, as bad as a rap as it gets sometimes, especially here recently, is historically, I would say, a next level. We've had mostly next level leaders. In other words, and, because they see that we got to take care of our own, but we also have historically given a ton to the rest of the world in terms of aid and everything like that. And that's changed here a little bit more recently, and not just with the current administration in the United States, but sort of in general, we've kind of been moving away from that, maybe for good reason, depending on how you come about it. Maybe because we, started seeing that we weren't able to help ourselves as much and we had work to do at home. And so we necessarily had to do that. But that's sort of, a certain way to look at that. And so as a whole, hopefully that gives you a little bit of a background into this idea of base level humans, culture level humans, and next level humans, and how they each sort of span this political sort of spectrum. And I think it's very important that we understand that the left and the right, because I think a lot of people would listen to this and say, oh, okay, well, the base level humans are, on the extreme left maybe, and the next level humans are on the extreme right, or vice versa. No, actually, what we're really seeing here is probably that the culture level humans tend to want to split into teams. The base level humans tend to want to, they certainly are certain factions and extremes, but they are sort of like the extreme. So I would say the culture level humans probably tend to set themselves up as both Democrats and Republicans, and the base level humans among us tend to be the extremes on the left, the extreme extremes on the left and the right. And so whereas the next level humans tend to probably occupy that gray zone in the middle, because they see that there are plenty of great ideas and great ways of being in the conservative Republican sort of mindset and idea, and also great ways of being and great ideas in the more progressive, liberal, sort of democratic way of seeing things. In other words, they're able to not go to extremes and essentially say, hey, there's good ideas here, and I sort of live in this spectrum, and they don't have a problem voting for someone on either side. And the reason they wouldn't is because they're not looking at it from a team-based thing. They're looking at it from, what does this leader bring to the table? Which brings me to the question that people have been asking me. How do you know if someone's a next level leader? Well, here's the acronym to remember. What does someone do when they're trying to ascertain whether something is good for them or not? That person vets another person, right? And so that's the acronym that we're going to use for this. VETS, V-E-T-S. What we do, a person when they're trying to decide who they're going to vote for, or who they're going to be friends with, or what situation is good for them, they're going to vet the situation. So the acronym to remember is VETS, V-E-T-S. So a next level human is a leader that goes by this VETS acronym, or at least you want to use this acronym in my mind to determine, is this person sort of operating from a next level human perspective? The first one is virtue, the V. Is this person a virtuous human? Basically, are they a good human? Are we dealing with Hitler here, or are we dealing with someone who's good? Are we dealing with a bad person, or are we dealing with a good person? Are we dealing with someone who is able to lead all people, or only wants to lead some people, right? Now, the Stoics have this idea of virtue really well worked out. So we'll use their sort of four sort of aspects of virtue. To be a virtuous human, someone who, is a good human, typically has these four virtues attached to them. One is the idea of they tend to have temperance, 2, justice, 3, courage, and 4, wisdom. This is the idea of the Stoic virtues. Now, temperance is this idea of self-control. A good leader, right, is not going to go into the Oval Office and be sleeping around with interns and stuff like that. That is going to be a knock against them as a next level leader, because it shows that they don't have self-control. They haven't mastered temperance. By the same token, they're not going to be reactive and egotistical and narcissistic and feel combative if someone disagrees with them. They're going to have control over their, sort of emotions. They're, a temperate person is someone that doesn't overdo food, drugs, women, sex, all these things. They're very temperate and balanced, and it is not that emotionally reactive. So we can kind of look and say, is this person temperate or not in the way they show up, and how balanced they seem, and how calm, cool, and collected they are, and whether or not they fall for temptation. So am I saying that someone may not be a good leader if they are, overweight and alcoholic and addicted to sex and messing around with the congressional interns in the restroom and stuff like that? Yes, I am. I'm saying that not necessarily they're bad, but that these things can point to the idea that these people have not mastered this temperance and may not be as virtuous as we would hope. Justice is this idea of fairness, the idea that if you're a leader, you are a leader to all people, not just some people. If you're, a white, male, you have to understand that your experience is not the whole experience, right? Justice means understanding that, we are all sort of different, and that we all sort of have needs. And this is where this idea of team human sort of comes in. And so justice and a commitment to justice and a commitment to that whole idea of, let's say, independence in the United States, independence of the, judicial branch from the, president and sort of the House, right? This idea that, we basically have a justice system that must be independent for our country to work. A good leader would be someone who's all about fairness and wants to prop up that. They also would be someone who wants, a free press and doesn't want a press that is interfered with by anyone else. So they would try to do things to, make the press as free as possible, because they understand that fairness is important and this dynamic is important. And so temperance and justice and courage. Absolutely, courage is a big one, right? Courage means being able to take decisive action and make choices. That takes courage. It takes courage just to kind of show up in the world and be a leader in the first place. In this sense, right, next level humans have courage. It doesn't mean culture level humans and base level humans don't have courage either, but we need to start measuring these. Is this person temperate? Is this person, just? Is this person, sort of courageous? And does this person have, sort of a wisdom about them? And wisdom's an interesting one, right? Because wisdom essentially says, that this person has some, life experience and some knowledge in this area. And it actually bleeds into the second aspect of this acronym. But virtue is really about, is this person a good human? Do they have sort of these, temperance and justice and courage and wisdom sort of attributes sort of about them? Are they hints that they don't have these things or they're not a good human? Look at their history and the way they handle people. Look at the way they talk about certain people and not about others, right? Look at how they show up. If there's a history of affairs, if there's a history of abuse, if there's a history of shady dealings, if there is actual affairs and scandals that have sort of gone on, these people may not be, sort of good, virtuous humans. This is important to sort of understand. And so their history tells you a little bit about that, and the current sort of scandals that they're in, and the way they react to these things as well is very important. Now, of course, one of the things I'll say here is virtue is tricky, right? Because kindness without boundaries is foolishness. And so a good leader, a virtuous human, a lot of times people say you just got to be kind. Right. And there's an argument that could be made. I know some people say that about certain leaders where they say, well, they have to be a hard ass. They have to kind of approach things like this because they have sort of boundaries. And so you have to use this idea that obviously we don't just want, a bleeding heart, emotional, like, oh my gosh, I love everybody, because at times as a leader, you have to take definitive, decisive, combative or protective actions. And so virtue, yes. Kindness, yes. Generosity, yes. Loving your fellow human, yes. But not at the expense of letting them take advantage of you or beat you down or making you so vulnerable that you put yourself or the people that you're charged to lead at risk. Most leaders, their major charge is to protect. And so obviously being virtuous also means you have to show up, right? And so the first one is virtuous. Are they a good human? When you look at these people and the way they show up in the world, do you see them as a good human, right? And if you are a more culture level type, which all of us have this, then certainly you can use some of your, culture level sort of ways of looking at this. If you're a Christian, if you're a Muslim, if you're religious, right? You can look and say, well, does this person measure up to what my religion says is virtuous? But I don't think that's good enough, because culture level humans, one of the reasons why you don't really want to operate from a culture level perspective is that oftentimes the team will rationalize away any indecent behavior. We all know leaders who are not very Christian-like, who Christians oftentimes support, partly because they're too culture level. A next level human Christian would be someone that says, yes, I want to see what Jesus, sort of would, measure this person against Jesus, but I also want to just measure them against being a good human, what I know is right, what I feel is right in my mind, and the way you talk to people and the way you treat people and the way you handle yourself. So it's very important that we look at this distinction. So that's the virtue part of the VETS acronym. The next one is, are they an expert, right? Expertise. Virtue first, expertise next. Expertise really covers two sort of areas. Are they educated and are they evidence-based in a sense? This is one of those things where you get into the argument about, to me, let's talk, we're talking leaders in general, but mainly politics, but let's talk political. Do you want somebody in the politics who doesn't have experience in politics, right? Expertise means I'm educated in sort of this particular area. I know how it works. I'm evidence-based, right, where I basically am using data rather than just my emotional reactivity or sort of what I think might be right. And I'm sort of have an independent sort of way of coming at this. And so expertise is hugely important. And so to me, if you were going to ask me, an educated, expert, independent type of person would be someone who is, is an expert or educated in a field related to politics, like perhaps law. We know that law is a great thing to sort of go into if you're going into politics, because if you're going to lead, having a law degree helps you understand the Constitution, helps you understand some of these things around justice and fairness and leading and things like that. Some people would say, well, they should have an education in business as well. And so maybe absolutely that might be a certain thing. I tend to lean away from that because I don't necessarily see how running a business is exactly the same as running the government. I see some parallels. So ideally, maybe, yes, the leader would have sort of education, around business and economics, but also have some education around sort of law and have a good, well-rounded sort of understanding of geopolitical conflicts and history and that kind of stuff. We would obviously love them to be educated in all those things and be not just educated, right? I was educated in natural medicine, but we all know the degree we get stops being that useful if you're not getting, a lot of experience elsewhere. I guess you could take a businessman who is just a businessman in the United States. That might not be the greatest businessman to bring into office, but maybe a businessman who has been doing international business is a little bit better. And maybe a businessman who's been doing international business has an education in law and sort of politics and has been, sort of involved in volunteering in state legislators, maybe was a mayor, a governor, and then president, or in Congress for a while. That's someone that has all the chops, doesn't it? So what we want to really look at is this idea that being emotionally reactive and kind of seeing that the government is a unique thing. It's a unique thing. Yes, there's some business aspects to it, managing money and stuff like that. Yes, there's some understanding sort of the law and, sort of the way government is structured. Yes, sort of understanding history and all of these things and understanding how laws are made and all this stuff is necessary. And so what I would say here is that education and expertise means someone that has expertise in the broad areas that are really defined by government and hopefully has some experience here. I'll actually walk you through a little bit of this so you can kind of understand education. When you think about being educated, here's the way to sort of look at this. Information, the ability to everything starts with information, right? So as we get educated, first we're exposed to information. Now, the ability to comprehend that information is really about smarts, right? It's really about, is the person smart enough? So it's not a popular term, but I'll just use it because it's important here. But some people don't have the mental faculties, right, to sort of understand certain things. We call them dumb. They're not able to understand the info. If you can understand the info, that's smarts. I can understand the information. However, you might not understand how to use that information. So intelligence is what takes information and makes it now knowledge, right? Intelligence is what organizes the information. Smarts helps us gain information. Intelligence helps us organize that information and turn it into knowledge. Now, at that point, most people who have any kind of education, high school education, that kind of stuff, who can comprehend, have the smarts and have enough intelligence to have some knowledge, right? Now, one thing I'll say here, though, is dogma and arrogance, which is really the domain of base level humans, can sometimes block knowledge. And the reason why is that if you are told a particular thing before, and research has been done on this, if you're told something by your family prior to gaining an understanding of it, you will tend to still believe what your family told you rather than learn the new information, right? Very few people, if you're a base level human, new information does not give you new knowledge, right? So what happens is new information just reinforces old knowledge. That's the idea of dogma. Dogma keeps people from being knowledgeable. Arrogance keeps people from organizing information in other ways. And so the idea is you want somebody who is smart enough to gain new information because they're going to be in a leading position. They don't know everything. People are going to be giving them information all the time. They need the intelligence to sort that information into knowledge. And then they need expertise, right? They need experience in applying that knowledge. And this is where having experience as a mayor or experience as a businessman or experience in, Congress or experience as a governor, experience leading, right? A big CEO, they have some experience, and that experience is what gives them wisdom. So Smarts leads to information. Information with intelligence leads to knowledge. Knowledge plus experience gives us wisdom. And one other thing I'll say here, if you're too biased, right? If you're so biased, like let's say you're someone who believes without a shadow of a doubt that, climate change is happening, climate change is real. You're so biased against anything else, then if new knowledge comes along that says, oh, maybe climate change isn't as big a deal as we said, or maybe it's not happening exactly the way we thought, bias will keep you from incorporating that new knowledge, and vice versa. If you're someone who's adamantly against the idea that climate change is a thing and a bunch of new knowledge comes along, information comes along that essentially says, yes, it is, your bias is going to keep you from accepting that, and you'll just remain dumb. And this is dangerous, obviously, for a leader. Now, there's one other level here. Wisdom, along with insight and intuition, is where you get genius. And I'll even say it a little bit more. Wisdom plus universal insight and intuition can often lead to genius, especially when you can repeat it. But one of the things I want to say here is a lot of times people really sort of love this idea of gut thinking, gut level thinking. They're really high on intuition and leading from your heart. And research shows pretty conclusively that this is not useful thinking. People who lead from their gut and just go with their gut almost always fail. But people who have the knowledge, the experience, and the wisdom, who then lead from their gut, oftentimes are better off. And that's because intuition is not magic. What people think is intuition is gut level thinking. Gut level thinking, emotional based thinking, is base level behavior. Intuition and insight-based thinking is more next-level behavior, because what it is essentially saying is you've developed a degree of expertise. You've got the knowledge, you've got the experience, you've become, sort of wise, and from there, intuition is not magic. Intuition is simply, very clearly, the integration of all your senses and then putting them together in a way that appears as an insight, that appears as an intuition, and leads you to a next sort of level. Intuition, when you study the science of intuition really cannot happen without a level of expertise and experience in that domain. And that's why people get it wrong, because they tend to think that we should be thinking emotionally. No, emotional-based reactivity is base level sort of thinking. It can be very protective at times when you're really in danger, but when it's sort of used to make rational reasoned decisions, or decisions that are complex and need data and need experience, we don't want emotional thinking there. We don't want to think from our gut. We want to think from our rational, reasoned places. And sometimes intuition can really serve us there, but intuition only provides a benefit when it comes along with a long time of expertise and things like that. This is illustrated in the idea of, pilots. There's this famous story of Sully. All of us remember the sort of flight that landed on the Hudson River, and he had taken off and landed so many times and had so much experience in a plane that the plane just felt wrong to him. The tower was saying, you can make it back to the tower. And he was saying, nope, something just feels wrong. I can't explain why I'm getting this insight or this intuition, but I know that the flight's not going to make it. And he followed his judgment. He landed the plane. He saved a bunch of lives. And they later determined he indeed would not have been able to make it back to the runway. Had he listened to the tower, and he would have sort of crashed that plane. People mistake that for gut thinking on his part. It wasn't gut thinking. It wasn't emotional thinking. It was intuition, and intuition came out of years and years and years of experience. And so that's what a good leader will have. They will have expertise. They will be educated. They will be evidence-based. They will sort of understand how to integrate information with their intelligence into knowledge, and their knowledge with experience into wisdom. And then sometimes the most genius ones are the ones who then can take universal insights and intuitions based off that experience and develop a genius around this. So you do want someone who's a real expert. Experts are definitely non-emotional thinkers most of the time. They are very data driven. They are very data driven. They are evidence based. And a good leader is going to look at someone and go, I'm not an expert in this realm. Tell me what you think. But they're not even going to stop there. They're then going to say, does anyone disagree with that? And they're going to have people around them that disagree with the experts. And they're going to have experts in other fields that are related and say, what about you? What do you think? And they're going to integrate all of that and make good decisions out of that. They're not going to do gut level thinking. They're going to be systematic in this and be very evidence-based in their approach. So that's virtuous expertise. The next one is that they are teachable. They are teachable, and that goes into just what I talked about. As a leader, what you want is somebody who is going to be able to be teachable and change based on the data. Here's an example of how I look at this. So people sometimes ask me, they say, Jade, how do you look at politics, right? I go, well, first I want to see who's the good person, who matches up, who's virtuous, right? Who's not a liar and a bullshitter and a base level human and a manipulator and an ego-based person and has some temperance and justice and courage and wisdom. First I go there. Then I want to know who's a real expertise, who's led before. Were they a mayor? Were they a governor? Do they understand, sort of our government and the things that are important? Do they understand a little bit about geopolitical issues? Do they understand a little bit about, business and things like that? And then I get into this idea of, can they be evidence-based and teachable based on the evidence? So for me, one of the things that drives me nuts is this idea of like these trigger words like socialism and conservatism and things like that. To me, if I was a leader, and the leader I would want is I'd want a leader to go, you know what? Let's look at the data. Let's look at all Western countries and let's see who's doing the best. There's data out there where there's real world randomized controlled trials going on right now. Different countries are doing different things, and they have been for some time. We've tried communism. Some countries still lean that way. We've tried democracy. Some countries still lose that way. We've tried socialism. Some countries still, lean that way. And we've tried a lot of things sort of in between. Which countries in the modern day have sort of figured this out? Which countries are the wealthiest, have the happiest people, have the best lives, have the best educated individuals? And we can look around and say, well, who are those countries, right? Who are the people who are doing best in all these areas, and what have they done? Have they integrated? And actually, one of the things that I think I have seen from this, and I'm not a true expert, so this could be debated, but to me, there are countries in the world who have integrated aspects of socialism and aspects of free market economies. These tend to be the ones who are doing the best on the world stage, who have the most educated, best entrepreneurial spirits. They tend to be growing. They tend to be, sort of wealthy. They tend to have very healthy, happy, people. And so a good leader, let's say here in the United States, may look and go, where are these countries? What is going on? Let's look at the data. And then how can we take that data and see what our best practices and institute some of those best practices into what we're doing while keeping what sets us apart and unique and speaking to our individual sort of nature. And so to me, this is what a good leader does. A culture level leader or a culture level person is going to essentially say, no, we can't do it that way because socialism, or we can't do it that way because of conservatism. They're basically just going to say, no, I don't care about these words. I just care about what works. Is there a way to potentially integrate these things? Who's doing the best on the world stage? Of course, the base level leader is going to essentially say, no, we're doing it this way. We've always done it this way. This is, we're just better. We're better. We're better than everyone else regardless, right? Without even really, looking at the data. Maybe we're not, and maybe we could do better. And maybe there's data out there that tells us we could do better. And to me, good ideas from either side. Take the best ideas from either side. That's what a good leader is going to do. So that's the teachable part. It also demonstrates that they have humility and open-mindedness, which is going to be important when you have things pop up like SARS-CoV-2, a pandemic, or a war type crisis, or any of these kinds of things. You're going to need to bring in people, and you're going to need someone that says, well, what's working, what isn't, what can we do? What do the experts think? What do the naysayers think? What does, the people with the outlandish ideas think? And basically be able to bring all that information together in this sort of, knowledge plus experience plus wisdom plus insight plus genius to make good choices. So yes, virtuous, yes, sort of experts in their field and able to think, but also teachable, open, humble, flexible mind, right? Because we know as leaders, they're going to have to deal with stuff that none of us want to deal with. I sometimes feel bad for the current, administration and how, everyone's like, just piling on when we don't know yet, right? We don't know. Right now it looks like perhaps they didn't do a great job, but maybe it wasn't about them. Maybe we need to sort of wait and see. We're going to let the data tell us, and then we have to be honest about it, whether we voted for these people or not. We have to be honest and just say, and this is where the next level human comes in. We have to be honest and say, yeah, they didn't do a good job with that. Doesn't mean they sucked all the way around, although they might. But honesty is critical in this, especially when choosing a leader. And so you go down the thing. Virtuous, check. Expertise, check. And then this teachable part is this part where things can begin to fall apart. Are they so egotistical or arrogant or ignorant or unable to make, flexible thinking decisions? The final one is the one where things get gray, and this is where people can go in either direction. And this is the idea of the S. VETS, acronym VETS. We've covered virtue, expertise, teachable. The last S is soldier. And the reason I pick soldier there is because what we want in a leader is someone who operates from principles, someone who has an honor code, someone who takes decisive action, someone who is all about extreme ownership. These are notoriously definitive concepts that we know about soldiers and warriors and those types of individuals. They have a code of honor. They know what they stand for. They're operating from principles versus culture level humans are operating from popularity. Good leaders don't operate from popularity. They operate from principles, and they're willing to go down with the ship if their principles sort of fail them. They're not an in that. They basically say, these are my principles. This is the way I show up. I make definitive, decisive action based on these things, and I have an honor code. These are the kind of leaders that show up and are able to get the job done versus just going with popularity. And so to me, this is actually really, really important. And that's where you start to look at and say, okay, well, if they have an honor code, what is it? And does it line up with mine? Right? And if they've taken decisive action, where can I see that they've taken decisive action? Where can I see where they take full ownership in leadership, or they're pointing and blaming? Because these things matter, right? There's a history. Most of these leaders have a history. If they blame and complain and shirk responsibility, that's not ownership, right? If they lie and cheat and aren't in their integrity, that's not an honor code. If they're wishy-washy and 1 minute they say one thing and the next minute they say the something else, this is a tough one here, right? Wishy-washy, because I remember back in the United States, for those of you who are overseas, we had Mitt Romney, I believe it was, who was a conservative that I liked. I didn't see anything wrong with him, but he got the wishy-washy sort of way of looking at things. And I remember thinking to myself, isn't it interesting? Here's a guy who was able to change his opinion based on data, was able to say, I was one way, and now I think a different way. And people, held that against him, when in my mind, a good leader can change his opinion. Why would we want a leader to be wrong in one area and then continue saying, I'm wrong? We want someone to be able to change their position based on data. And so this idea of Mitt Romney, and those who don't know him, was sort of this, conservative leaning person who ran for office in the United States that was pegged as wishy-washy, when the way I see it is that one of the principles, by the way, that a good leader will have is a principle that essentially says be able to learn from my lessons and my failures. So this is a person that may have done that, and that was held against him by culture level humans who just wanted to be attached to their team. And because he was labeled as the other team, they couldn't see that as a good thing, where I absolutely did. I would want a leader who can say, yes, I was wrong. Yes, I changed course. And now I see it this way based on data. The last thing I'd want is for someone to be like, no, I'm not wrong. I've never been wrong. I won't ever be wrong. I won't ever change my mind, which we certainly have and had leaders like that sort of in the past. And so a soldier, right, takes on this idea of extreme ownership, operates from principles. And what I would say the most important principle for me as I'm vetting people is this idea that they can learn from their mistakes, that they can use data to change their mind. And, and that's a tough one, right? Because if you're changing your mind all the time based on popularity, it's hard to know, are they changing based on popularity? Or are they really changing based on principles? And this is what each of us, as we evaluate our leaders, have to essentially look for. So this is essentially how I see this. A next level human leader is going to be someone who has virtue. They are a good human. They are not, just about themselves. They're not basically, trying to lead the white male race. They're trying to lead everybody, right? They're basically saying, I'm a leader for everyone. And I have in my personal life, I can exhibit temperance and justice and courage and wisdom. And in my leading life, I'm about team human. But I also have a hierarchy. I was hired to lead and voted to lead this particular country. So in my mind, virtue essentially also means that they're not pushovers, that they basically have a hierarchy, that yes, they are about team human, but they do have boundaries. So they are going to take care of home first and then take care of other people. And they are going to make sure that they are, have in the back of their mind, yes, they're going to lead with goodness and being open and generosity, but also have a stance of don't cross us. Here's our boundaries. I do have to protect ourselves. They also need to be true expertise and have a true expertise and understand that because there's so much we don't know, so many things that come up, they need to be data driven. They can't be just reactive from their emotional core. They need to understand, or at least be able to demonstrate, that that intelligence is only half of the battle. And everyone can be intelligent. As a matter of fact, intelligence can get you in trouble, because intelligence with bias and dogma simply means you're really, really good at rationalizing your wrong beliefs. And if they are wrong. So an intelligent person with a wrong belief will rationalize through bias and dogma. They will rationalize their wrong beliefs. So intelligence is not enough. Intelligence must be turned into knowledge plus experience plus wisdom, into sort of insight and intuition and this open-mindedness. A good leader is going to be teachable. They are going to be able to learn the things from expertise, that they'll be, sort of this broad sort of understanding, very smart individuals, but also be able to learn and be teachable. The other thing about that part there, the T, is that they should be teachers too, good communicators, and able to not just be teachable, but good teachers. And then they should have this code, this way of, being a warrior and a soldier and operating from principles and an honor code. And then we can come along and say, how do we vet these people? How does someone vet this particular leader? A next level human is going to vet them, in my mind, in this way. Are they virtuous? Are they an expert? Are they teachable and a teacher? And are they sort of a soldier? And that is, to me, how a next level person is going to be evaluating them. They're not going to be evaluating them on the culture level. I'm Democrat and he's Republican, so therefore I'm not voting with him. Instead, they're going to say, I don't care if he's Democrat, Republican, or whatever he is or she is. It's basically, how does he or she show up in this VETS acronym for me, right? Or there's definitely not going to be a base level human to just be like, I just want to win. I'm always right. I'm going to be this extreme left or right individual, and I'm going to do everything I can to have everything be my particular way, forgetting that the way the world moves forward, the way the world grows, is integrating these ideas, these desperate ideas. Some of the best countries in the world have effectively taken conservative ideals and liberal progressive ideals and married them, have successfully taken free market economies with socialist ideas and married them. And this is how a next level human will see this. The idea that certain things are off the table because they're associated with socialism or conservatism is asinine. It's absolutely silly if those ideas are good ideas. Good ideas can come from all areas, and a next level human and a next level leader are going to use those things. So I'm going to end right there. I know this is a difficult one. I'm sure you were triggered every which direction, but do me a favor, drop me a line, hit me up on DM, tell me if you were offended, tell me where I got things wrong or right here. Hit me up with your questions. Do me a favor, go and you go over to the podcast and give me a review. Written reviews are really great. I really love those, and I love seeing what you want. Also for future, if you want me to cover certain topics in the future. Part of the reason I even did this one is because you asked for it. So I really appreciate you being here. Thanks for being on the show, and I will see you next time.